hope that we don't drop any nuclear bombs today in the intellectual capital world, because
that's all right. They'll come back.
Yeah, we tried doing that one time where, remember, we tried to play back and like re-edit the video based on what I can remember us having a conversation about, and that ended up in the archives of the trash can.
Probably got a lot of those, man. Yeah, it happens, dude. We're just ironing it out and such, and figuring out best ways to do this, and even the best have issues, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time picking up on you, so I'm gonna try to increase my volume here. We may have made many strides forward in the branding, in the process, in the understanding of what it is our purpose is here in doing the Left Coast Caveman project, Left Coast Caveman way of life, supreme being through modern hunting and gathering to include nutritional modalities, fitness modalities, and mentalities, all for supreme being, better well-being. The antithesis of that would be a lot of what you see going on in the world today, just hooked on drugs, be it street drugs or pharmaceuticals, or hooked on dopamine hits of various kinds, trash junk nutrition, trash junk mentalities, politics, poisonous mindsets. I would argue even just junk entertainment. However, we make room for all of that in the Left Coast Caveman way of life, leftcoastcaveman.com. All of our socials abbreviated CVMN. But we do make room for a little bit of debauchery from time to time. We're not perfect, right?
Maybe a few days a week.
But the whole idea is supreme being, keeping it cave, keeping one on track in life, business, mind, family, whatever it is that you're aspiring to do. A unifying life purpose, zeroing in on that and living a fulfilling life as we take time here on this planet Earth as human beings, Homo sapiens. So our whole premise grounded in the idea that supreme being is both modern and progressive, but also steeped in this concept of we are human being, and what have we lost along the way that should be resurrected, restructured? What have we constructed around us that we need to deconstruct to then activate and access and make, again, practical and accessible all of these concepts of health and wellness and well-being, that because they're human, because they're innate, because they are in keeping with how we ought to be living, they shouldn't be so esoteric and difficult to access. However, there are some modalities that we come in contact with that are need a little bit more unpacking and explanation. And that most especially, I think, becomes true in the nutritional modalities. And so as we talked last week, we talked about the overarching principle of GUAM being that it's in primal primers, and primal primers being one of our macro programs at leftcoastcaveman.com, implying that primal, obviously what we already talked about, but primers is kind of how you start, where to begin, these things that ought to be in your repertoire of fitness, nutrition, and mindset every single day, without exception. And so GUAM being like this impetus to act, this idea in your mind of get up and move, GUAM being that catalyst that propels you forward, I would say, not only just with regard to the 10,000 step modality that we discuss, but also a lot of these modalities that we discuss. Get up and move. It's an impetus for action. It's taking action. Before I go on any further, is there anything with regard to GUAM that you want to revisit from our conversation last week, which was 56? We're now at 57.
Covered, sir. Proceed onward.
All right. So one thing that we do at Left Coast Caveman too, we talked about the macro programs, primal primers, sapien strength being the next step forward, but then also the apex actualization. That's the community aspect. Those who feel as though they are on the path along with us, supreme being through modern hunting and gathering. You hear something you like here today, you go to leftcoastcaveman.com, you click join the cave. You are then part of the community, apex actualization community, the ancestral status being that you're one of the originals. We've got quite a few individuals that interface with our content and our way of life as it is right now, but this sharing mechanism, this community aspect is both important from the, hey, I can text somebody right now in the Apex Actualization Community GUAM and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Likewise, there's several people within our circle of influence that I would say you can text GUAM right now. They know what it means. They know what that means and why. It's the first thing in the morning. GUAM, get up and move. It's the answer to a lot of your ailments. Get up and move. Having a shitty day. GUAM. Feeling like you're lacking of energy. Whatever that is. That GUAM should be the first go-to. And then perhaps you go into different modalities from there, and it's a constant sharing throughout the day. And one thing we've been sharing a lot throughout our Supreme Being Alliance, me, you, and Mr. BG, who did this fine artwork that we see all around Left Coast Caveman and every image that we see at leftcoastcaveman.com. But we share a lot of back and forth within that community, and I'd say nutritional modality. I get the question a lot of what do we mean by modern hunting and gathering? What do we mean? Why do we purposely use the terminology nutritional modality and not diet? A lot of what we share back and forth too, like I sent you this morning, my nutritional modality of this morning. There's intention behind it. There's purpose behind it. There's always a why and when and how for nutrition. And we left off the GUAM modality, kind of going into that where we left off was talking about this battlefront of CPG. And I would expand that to anything that consumers have access to purchase and put into their body. But it's almost the nutritional modality mindset and the intention behind nutritional modality is, I would say, the equal component of GUAM to fitness modality. Like the base level of like what your intention is behind the intentionality of nutrition is that impetus to action also with regard to nutrition. Would you agree? Do you understand? Like, are you following what I'm saying?
A bit. So the last part threw me a little bit, but I think my hamster wheel is catching up here. So meaning that you're eating with the intention behind a future activity. Is that adequate to say? So for instance, if you're gonna, and this we could relate this to something I've been experimenting with lately. I'm about to hit some high-end cardio in jiu-jitsu, drilling, and some sparring. And prior to that, a few hours prior, I've been messing with increasing my complex carbohydrate bolus to see how that affects performance, whatnot. So I'm eating with the intention of, hey, I'm going to see how this fuel interacts with my body and, equals performance, right? Or for instance, following a heavy weightlifting session, I may increase my protein intake because I know that my body's now going to be in a state of, rest and repair. And protein obviously is those, constituent parts for the amino acids and to build back up. So is that kind of what you're trying to capture here?
Precisely, yeah. I would say that the tie-in between GUAM, where we left off, being the mechanism through which you engage sort of your fitness modality of the day, saying that your intentionality behind nutrition and why we refer to nutritional modality as opposed to like diet is that equal component. It's that mechanism through which you make a decision about what it is that you consume and why, or even like the when you consume. Is there a specific time that you do or do not eat? Is there a specific time that you consume a different type of nutritional modality? Kind of starting there with the intentionality of nutrition is equal to or similar, I would say, in terms of the GUAM modality with regard to fitness.
I might say that's even more important. And the reason why I would put more importance to this, and I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this also, is, let's just go with the average person, right? Average person, let's go above average, the guy that works out an hour a day. And we all know that's not enough movement, right? Clearly, all sorts of intermissions between that 1 hour of sanctioned workout, be it a run, weightlifting. And obviously, we advise more movement snacks throughout the day, right? This is a term I heard this morning, which I really like. I'm going to proprietize it for myself, but movement snacks, I like that, even though I'm not a snacking guy, but we all kind of get that, the image of what that is. So we think about those movement snacks. We think about how many times a day that you have choices behind what you eat, and how many times a day you have choices in your exercise. And I would bet that for the majority of people, there's a heavier weight on the amount of choices, dietarily speaking, fueling speaking, nutritionally speaking, than there is when it comes to movement. And I think that's where where like the overabundance of like, well, if you had to like pick a lever to, the push or pull, which one would be more efficacious in terms of overall better health and such? And obviously both. To illustrate this, so I would say if you'd only pick one, I would say nutrition, your fueling is going to be more powerful, because this is something you spend more time doing or having choices behind. And that's, of course, under the lens of modern day, mostly sedentary life, or we're commuting or sitting at a desk, and Left Coast Caveman will help you navigate that more fruitfully. But for the average person, I think there's just so much more weight based on nutrition every day. And that's the hardest part of it. That's why so many people fail at it. And not to mention all the marketing out there and the exposures to, food or fueling items that seem healthy for you, but really aren't. So.
No, I like the tie that you're making, and I really especially appreciate the point too about the movement snacking. Like, people don't consider how often they should or need to get up and move until they do start integrating with the program and following along all of the modalities together, which includes the 10,000 step, and it creates that impetus in your mind to act. And it's the same thing. I like that you use snacking, because like, there's almost like a dichotomy there of yin and yang when it comes to snacking for nutritional modality, and then the non-snacking that really happens with movement. If I'm understanding what your point was correctly, of like, do we actually consciously feel the need to get up and, like, we should feel the need to get up and move frequently throughout the day, and that requires us to initiate that GUAM modality of like, okay, get up and move. I got to get up and move. And I've used it a lot for different purposes, for different intentions, but it is similar in that with food, the opposite is almost true. It's like, well, people feel like, oh yeah, I woke up, so I need to go to the McDonald's drive-in line, like you shared to the community the other day. How many people aren't really thinking about what the intention is when they're consuming food and the nutritional modality? And that's why it is that same impetus. It's like the intention and the use of nutritional modality versus diet is because it's like, it's wide open from there, but it's asking everybody to be honest and to take a quick glance at what is the intention of the nutrition, like right then and there. Is it just, because it's fine for like, well, is it for enjoyment? Okay, that's fine. Right?
I think I would argue it can always be enjoyable. I mean, dude, I have a bit of a different type of diet or fueling style. I really need to get away from that word. I hate the word diet. We talk about it a million times, but man, diet is synonymous with failure, right? Like, most people that diet, they're in a constant state of failing, and they're also feeling the need to diet, meaning that they're trying to make up for a period of time of doing the wrong thing and leading to, their current state of unhealth and not being aligned with, their physical manifestation of their body. But I find a lot of enjoyment in like most every day at lunch, 1:00, I hit a salad and I usually have some sort of fish. And to most people that would sound like, oh dude, I'm sorry. Oh, that sucks. That must be hard. How are you doing that? Like, hey, actually, I love that. I look forward to that fucking salad I'm like 29 minutes until I get to have my salad. I'm pretty stoked about that. It's a good salad. You know, like it doesn't feel like I don't feel like I'm getting any less enjoyment from that food than if I were to have, you know, a couple burgers right now. In fact, I feel like I get more enjoyment because I know, hey, this is healthy for me. I'm eating. I know exactly what I'm eating. I know all the ingredients that are going into it. There's no X factor of, oh, but I feel like shit afterwards. No, it's very, and I also eat it consistently. I know what I'm going to eat. I know how it makes me feel. And it's just, I don't know, there's something to that is empowering also. And I think most people just, they think that it has to be one or the other. It's like, no, you can have a fueling strategy that's healthful and actually really look forward to it. And I think that's one of those things that most people, they think they have to do this big sacrifice to, you know, eat properly to fuel healthily. And it's like, it's not, if you do it right, it's not that in that way at all. And in fact, you'll start, I mean, as you gain momentum with that type of strategy, once you go back or you fall off a little bit, or you say you have an intentional debauchery day, a Saturday, and you hit some fried chicken somewhere, and you'll be reminded why that's maybe not a good idea. Your body will tell you. I guarantee that it will manifest in one way or another, and be it at the very moment, a few hours later, or the next day. Like your body will excrete those poisons, those things that it is not as adept at digesting any longer because of your change, and it will actually make you not want to eat it more. And I tell you what, I mean, and I love that cycle too, because I'm totally, you know, we all wax and wane. The holidays coming up. I know, you know, it gets difficult for most, but I tell you what, man, like as you gain momentum with your strategy, I feel like it's easier to not fall off and to say no to these things. And yeah, I might allow a little dessert this year. I might, but I maybe not, because I know what happens when I have dessert. I feel like shit, and then I might want it more. And I can tell you what, the next day, dude, like your insulin levels, like it's so up and down. Like, dude, you're gonna be hungry at like 7 a.m. for no reason. And I'm never hungry at 7 a.m, but I'll be ravenously hungry. I don't know exactly why. And it's just sometimes it's not worth that to me.
Yeah, we've unpacked this topic several times, and it always kind of circles around the same type of terminology, but I think it's important to always constantly revisit it, because we find ourselves sharing this amongst all the modalities. I think nutritional modalities always find their way in the community, in the sharing aspect of the community, because it's so pervasive and it's so exponentially leveraging. So it deserves to be talked about as often and as because it changes, and it's all because as new technologies come, as new hunting and gathering opportunities present themselves. And to be clear, we talk about hunting and gathering, that includes CPG. What are you putting into your body? CPG, consumer packaged goods, for those of the uninitiated. We are CPG professionals, Mr. Sylvester and I combined, a couple decades, and a lot of people in our circle, I would say, we're amongst the most expert when it comes to consumer packaged goods and reading, know thy numbers, know thy labels, reading the labels, understanding what is in food and what that does to you has been our path and our purpose since 2017, particularly in how it aligns with your performance, cognitive function, your athletic performance, your energy level, managing your energy level. We are students of this, and we have had an unbiased, non-associated, we don't have any alliances to any of these companies we're unbiased, for lack of a better way of putting it. So we've really taken a long time to unpack nutritional modalities, and I think that's why it's important that we continue to draw this distinction between what we mean by diet and balance. And what do you hear? You always often hear those words together: balanced diet versus what we talk about with nutrition. And you made a couple good points, because I think that little shift in terminology, going from diet to nutritional modality, going from the idea of, because diets, the intention behind a diet is always myopic and always short-sighted. It's always, I'm trying to lose weight, I'm on this diet. I'm trying to do this, I'm on this diet. Whereas you use specifically the word strategy a lot, and fuel, and that implies more of a multifaceted can span across every hour of every day for every intention and purpose, and getting everybody to wrap their heads around that, rather than, it's been a real challenge. And that's why I think continuing to unpack it is important, because the conversations that I have, people always fall back to this idea of, oh yeah, well, diets don't work and everybody should just be balanced, and balance is key and enjoyment is key. And yes, of course, that is what we're saying. And what you're saying is even beyond that, and saying the more you have a strategy and the more you stick to it, the more enjoyment you will have. And I would say too that it's okay to go completely off the rails sometime too. If it's a holiday, I mean, that's part of the intention too. And should you have dessert? Should you not have dessert? It's how cave is that dessert, and what is it going to do to you? Like, I mean, somebody makes a from scratch from the farmer's market apple pie. I'm going to eat half of it and I'll feel fine, because that would be my modality. But let's say it's got high fructose corn syrup in it, and it's a from the box and in a package wrapper, plastic wrapper that is that damage worth it? And for me, I agree with you. That's like, there's some levels where you have to put up and say, look, my intentions, the downside for me eating that is so great that it will mess up my intention for so long that it's not worth I don't even get any enjoyment out of it. Same thing with this McDonald's drive-in line that you were talking about the other day. It's like, the feeling that you're going to get from that is so bad. Is it worth it?
I think, and I would say that most people, they achieve like this equilibrium to that bad feeling, meaning that's just every day. And I think that's why they do it. They're not as acutely aware as we are. And to give context, I was in a parking lot of a grocery store doing some modern hunting and gathering, and I there's a McDonald's right across the street, and I see that McDonald's drive-through full every day. Every day, McDonald's is still crushing it, and I'm so impressed by what they do, just from a business perspective. Like, wow, you guys are fucking crushing it right now. And I'm not seeing lines like that at a lot of different places, but at McDonald's, man, there's something that sauce, dude. But so most people, and I think about those folks that are in that drive-through, and I'm just like, dude, what are you doing? Like this, you're about to. I mean, I should look at the calorie content of like one meal, right? Like probably what, 1,500 to 2,000 calories. It has to be. It has to be. And supersize it, dude. Like, that's a crazy bolus of calories to begin with. Not to mention all the oils, rancid oils, and all the GMOs and fucking fake feta crap meat. Like what? I mean, dude, but they've habituated to this consistent style of eating, of fueling. And it's fine. And their body, and I guess handles it in one way or another for now, right? And then eventually it doesn't, and by that point, you've got to do a lot of adjusting, and it's really tough. And now you're not adjusting on your terms. You're adjusting because you have to, and you're trying to back out, 20 years of poor eating. I'm just amazed at it, especially in this day and the day and age of knowing that you're making a bad decision. We all know if you're sitting in if you're sitting in a drive-through, maybe except for if you're getting a coffee, whatnot, you're making a bad decision, right? At one level or another, you have to know they're like, there's better options out there, and I'm not exercising that right now. And I would love to do it sounds mean, but like do a body composition and psychological profile of everybody in that drive-through. And I bet you would find just dysregulation galore. Because there's a lot of bad things probably going on in each one of those cars, each one of those people that are making that decision for whatever reason. And it's fascinating to me. And I think that represents a great deal of the American people, a great deal of first world countries. And it's quite disturbing that in this day and age of all that knowledge and all the availability of great foods, and they're making that choice.
I love it, because you just landed exactly. You built it back up to the crescendo where it last left off, and that is, I love the idea of equilibrium to bad feeling. And I think as you talk about this, I think, who would choose that? And then my mind goes to this. Well, perhaps it's fascinating what you might find out from your in-depth study and from an ethnographical perspective, and start looking into, well, here are the nutritional modalities with absent any kind of intent, like logical, life unifying purpose tie to their intention with why they're eating, what they're eating, and what they're doing. And you might find, yeah, it's fascinating. I think you'll know the results you'll find, but it may even be more nefarious than that. And it may be where we find ourselves really needing to push for like this is a major problem that is a major, it's an ecosystem that's feeding itself, and it's more nefarious than it might appear on the surface, that these inflammatory oils and these soy lecithins and additives and preservatives and everything lead to this level of cognitive ability, which leads to more consumers going towards this item and that item, and more people willing to then go to the doctor and get prescriptions for this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And how many people go back to that let food be thy medicine protocol that we talk about at Left Coast Caveman, and having this intention and realizing that maybe they don't need any of that stuff, or maybe their mind would start to wake up and they would think, why am I even in here doing this or getting this food, when honestly there's so much better options out there from almost every single perspective. And I would say that people are waking up to that, but you make what I think about are, do people understand how practical and accessible it really is from a nutritional perspective? They think, oh, well, you got to go to Whole Foods. You need to be making six figures. Maybe these people are in McDonald's because they're selling their 1,293 calories for $6.99. That's all they can afford. It's hard to get 1,293. It's actually hard to get 12,093 calories, or 1,293. That was the number. I looked it up. That's the average calorie count for a meal at McDonald's. Which, when you know, what I've always found fascinating, because all of these modalities tied together, and they're one ecosystem within a program that tie together. Sapien Strength, Plug-in Sapien Strong, Primal Primers, Apex Actualization, Left Coast Caveman. It's like a Swiss Army knife of modalities, and they all play together. And we throw them out here in this format because we all know, anybody in the Apex community knows what we're talking about when we say know thy numbers. We know that's kind of hard to get when you're paying attention to your running out of time. Just give me the 10-minute window. 10 minutes starting now. It's 12:43. 10 minutes starting now. When you're paying attention to your nutrition, your intention behind your nutrition, and you're implementing that modality, and you're implementing know thy numbers, and then it goes on and on and on. I'd say Sapien Strength, we can pay a lot of attention to peeling back or going deeper into what are the basics are water and primal primers, obviously protein and macros and primal primers, fat, carbohydrates, whatever. But digging deeper into the Sapien Strength would be more implicit of all of the different micronutrients and things to avoid, and putting it all together as, when you're paying attention to all of that, then your intention starts to develop itself almost. Oh, well, my body composition isn't exactly what I want to do. Maybe I'll do this. And it's fun. That's part of the enjoyment too, is like you were talking about earlier. That's why I would suggest we avoid diet and balance and all this. It's 100% intention all the time. And the more you pay attention, the more fun it is, and the more you understand things. Like when you say 1,293 kcals for a meal, you understand that's a lot to get in one rip.
And to put it in context for everybody that doesn't really pay much attention to like calorie densities of food. So 5 eggs. Hey, how many calories do you think 5 eggs would have?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you start that line of thought again? Because a pop-up came up on your face right when you said to put it into perspective.
Yeah, so to put it into perspective for those that don't pay much attention to the calorie densities of certain foods. So if you had to guess, you're going to do a scramble of eggs. So let's just keep it real simple. 5 eggs, which is a good amount of eggs. How many calories do you think that would be?
That's a good question. The fat in it, because I eat a lot of egg whites, but the fat usually rounds up your calories a lot. I'm going to guess 900.
350.
5 eggs. 350?
Yeah, 70 calories per egg.
Wow.
Think about that.
Couple handfuls of macadamia nuts and you're you're in the 1,000 club.
Right. And you're thinking about all the protein, the cholesterol, the fats. I mean, in my opinion, the egg is one of the perfect foods out there, and it is a staple of my fueling strategy. But just think about that. Like, you could get like halfway full off of 5 eggs. I'll usually do 5 eggs, and then I'll do some greens on the side. And that's enough. I mean, that's a badass meal, in my opinion. I'm usually keeping it around like 700 calories about, and that fills me up in a good way. So you think about that McDonald's, like, yo, like how your conveyor belt, known as your whole digestive system, that whole thing is working overtime trying to digest and uncouple all those franken chemicals. Let me tell you, and that's why you feel tired. You're having to redirect all this blood flow, and good luck getting anything done after a meal like that. It's not happening. You might as well take a nap and hope for better things tomorrow. And that's if you're not on the toilet the whole time. But once again, I think a lot of people, they just habituate to this low performance on the daily basis. They accept that. And I remember this even when I was more heavily involved in like San Francisco corporate world. Lunchtime was sandwich time. You get a big sandwich, you get a soda, you have some chips, and guess what? Like the next hour after that, dude, you're not doing your best work. You're sitting there just going, oh, you're kind of like half out of it at the desk, dude, and hoping nobody notices, and that was true. Every day.
Well, and you bring up the perfect point too, as to why it's not only what, but when and how you eat. That is all encompassing within nutritional modality rather than it being diet, or why we don't focus on diet, because things like that, just knowing that, what do you think is happening when you wake up and you eat a big breakfast? Sometimes that's needed depending on what your fitness modality is, and your intention behind the whole purpose of why you're on the Left Coast Caveman way of life at the current moment. And that changes over time. It's a path, right? And how often have you ever been on a path that is straight and narrow the whole way, all the way, just straight? It's going to wind, it's going to twist, it's going to turn. Life is this way, and so that's why the nutritional modality must fluctuate along with it. Sometimes,
and it all starts with that self-auditing practice, and I think that's probably one of the larger themes of primal primers that is critical that people start inviting into their lives, is getting handy with knowing like what your calories are every day. Like, and once again, you don't have to always metric these things, but establish those baselines. And that's the only way you're ever going to make any sort of effective change towards any sort of body weight composition, be it fat, be it muscle, whatever it is. We all weigh ourselves. We all want to be somewhere. And the only way to plus or minus on that somewhere is going to be through knowing your baselines. And I've started to really put it together lately, and I'm very excited about this. And like, we were texting earlier about it. Hey, I included a great deal of more oats last week, and I gained some weight. And that's not a bad thing. I was like, okay, so that was like, I wasn't in as much of I wasn't at homeostasis. I wasn't at a good place of between burning and intaking. I was more like, as in I had a surplus. Okay, so let's scale that back. Let's titrate it back a little bit. But I also liked the performance I got from some of these sessions with those oats. So it's like, okay. And that's like the fun part where you start dialing it in. And I'm not saying you have to weigh everything out. And I mean, some people get into that. I'm not into that. I like to, I ball it a little bit, but I do keep note of what's going on. And that's the only way you're going to be able to make any sort of effective change. And that's what, I mean, if people were like taking down their calories like that after that McDonald's meal and going like, oh shit, if you're on a 2,500 day, goal, whoa, I can't eat a whole lot more. That's over half my day almost. So these are things to consider and a good habit to build in. And that's where it gets fun. And that's when you really putting, the rubber to the road, as the saying goes. And I can't espouse the value of that type of auditing more than anything else. I mean, I would argue that that's more important than even probably auditing your workouts. And although do it all of it's good for you, but I think if there's one that you want the most amount of change, least amount of work, that's the one.
Yes, sir. With the 3 minutes left, I just want to say, we always do. I love the format of why we're here, why we're doing this. This is LCC number 57, Left Coast Caveman Way of Life. And there are areas where we feel we've arrived at cave meditations and cave implementations of the nutritional modalities, and that's what we share at our site, leftcoastcaveman.com, and under the programs, macro programs, primal primers. That's where we've arrived on some specific steps one can take towards better well-being and sapient strength. Even more micro steps and a Swiss Army knife, all of these different moves. Think of it as a martial artist moving towards the highest level of achievement. There's different modalities for different purposes, different intentions, different situations, but there's also areas where we haven't quite arrived, and that's why this forum, that's why we continue to have these casts and the cave conversations and the apex actualization community, those who are dedicated towards supreme being through modern hunting and gathering, having these conversations and sharing these modalities, because it's why we come back and you tee up 3 really great ways that we can follow up this next conversation, which would be 58, LCC 58, found at our YouTube channel, Left Coast Caveman, CVMN. We all weigh ourselves, you said. I don't. I haven't weighed. I mean, we do, but we don't. I mean, like, I haven't weighed myself in a really long time. And thinking about these bridges, so where we or these key pillars or these bridges, for example, like we talked about nutritional modalities, we talk about fitness modalities, but starting to line in on those focus points of these bridges between nutrition and fitness. And you mentioned the oats and how they have a specific. I liked my fitness performance during some of those, like zeroing in on some of those key performances and why even the intention of not eating for a specific period of time. What are the bridges to the fitness modality that you can obtain through those different modalities? So, or through the different nutritional modalities. And there's 59 seconds left. So it's all about keeping it cave, man. It's all about keeping it cave, man.
And what I'll do also is I'll put down my recipe I'm currently using, doing some experiments with for jujitsu performance on my overnight oats. And I think I don't quite have the quantity down just yet. I'm going to titrate down a little bit on it. But in terms of the ingredients, man, it's a killer recipe. So I'll share that out there. I'll put a little blurb on it because I think it could help some folks out. And, lots of different ways to do it too. So I'd love to hear what other people are doing.
I love what you're doing, dude. And the El Ruderai, if you haven't had that yet, the Cave El Ruderai yogurt, now you've got 2 people saying, I don't know what I just put in my mouth, but that's not what she said.